Hi, my name is Heba Gowayed. I am an associate professor of sociology at Hunter College and the Graduate Center in CUNY. I am a scholar of migration, which means that I look at how people experience moving from place to place. Why would anybody leave home? Why would anybody try to make it in a new country where they're going to be strangers, where they're going to be minoritized, where they're going to experience discrimination? So I look at global mobility from the perspective of people on the move. What does it tell us about borders? What does it tell us about the countries that they enter? What does it tell us about the countries that they leave? So that's what you would learn from me if you were in my class at Hunter College, or if you read any of my books, such as Refuge, which is the book that I've already published about Syrian refugees who are experiencing migration to countries like Canada, Germany, but also the United States, or the book that I'm working on now, which is about borders and their costs and the price that people pay in order to cross from home, to leave home, to cross the borders that they meet on their way, and to arrive in their final destinations, countries where they're hopeful, where they have aspirations for a better life for themselves and for their children. So I've taught at a lot of different places over the course of my career. I've taught at Ivy League institutions, I've taught at private institutions, I've taught at public institutions. But the thing that really makes Hunter a terrific place to work, the thing that makes me happy and joyous whenever I walk into class, the thing that made me tear up at the end of my first class at Hunter, is that sitting in front of you in these classes is New York. New York with all its diversity, New York with all its struggles. There's first generation students, there's immigrant students, there's minoritized students. There are students from all different kinds of backgrounds. And as somebody who teaches migration, to be able to teach migration to immigrants is just a remarkable and transformative and magical experience. So what I tell my students is that I'm not teaching them anything new about how difficult the migration experience is, or how difficult it is to be an immigrant, or even what it means to be a racialized minority in a new country. But what I am teaching them is how to script, how to make sense of their own personal scripts, how to make sense of their family histories, how to make sense of their narratives, how to make sense of the diverse communities that they inhabit, but also how to make sense of news headlines such as migrants arrive in New York. How do we understand that from the perspective of these global inequalities that generate the movements of people, from the policies that receive them, from the narratives of the people themselves and what they're telling us about why they made these journeys to get here? I am the daughter of immigrants. My family moved to this country when I was 2 years old. And growing up, being a daughter of immigrants meant that in my case, I was in an Arab Muslim family in the south of the United States, in a place that was not hospitable to people of color, people who look like me, people who look like my mother who wore the hijab, people who look like me who also wore the hijab briefly. And it was 9/11 that really cemented my belief that I was going to study the social sciences, because during 9/11, I was sitting in gym class in the second period in my Alabama classroom, and I watched the planes hit the Twin Towers. And as I watched the planes hit the Twin Towers, like everybody else in my classroom, I was horrified at what was happening. And shortly after, my name was read over the intercom, and I was shocked. And I thought something had happened to a family member. I was, in that moment of anxiety, I was unsure of what it was that was going on. And my father, when I got home, sat me on the kitchen table and said, when people are scared, they don't use rational decision making, and they are going to attribute bad actions to people because of their identities. And that was the day that I learned about race, that I learned that as an Arab woman, at that time an Arab girl, a Muslim girl, that I was going to have the behaviors of others attributed to me, despite the fact that I had no association with them, and I had no knowledge of that before then. And so he talked to me about the Japanese internment camps. He talked to me about segregation in the south of the United States, about Jim Crow. And he said, this is just another iteration of that. And we had to be safe because people were going to treat us based on their misconceptions, based on racialization. It was then that I began to have this embodied experience of race. And it's then that I began to inquire as to why it was such a durable inequality, why racism persisted for so long, despite it being so irrational and making no sense. So, did you know that asylum is actually a human right? So asylum is a human right that is enshrined in international law and also enshrined in the United States, specifically in the Refugee Act of 1980. So as we're watching the news coverage of people crossing over the border, as people are cast as these intruders, using words like illegal, using words like floods of people, using words like intruders, what we're actually doing is we're miscategorizing them, because it is absolutely their right to cross the border and ask for legal representation, ask for legal recognition, which is what asylum is. And so as you're watching the news, the next time somebody casts an asylum seeker as undocumented or as illegal, you need to say, nope, that's not actually true. Asylum is a human right, and it is everybody's right to travel in pursuit of safety.